What does a beautiful future look like to you?
You can flip a negative mood on its head.
This was a talk that was all over the place, but then New York, you are all over the place.
There are experiences that you just don't get anywhere else.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Stellene Volandes, the editor of Town & Country, and thank you for joining us for session 3 of the Way Forward series, a 3-part conversation presented by Town & Country and the 92nd Street Y and curated by the Public Theater. We imagined this series of conversations after a year of social isolation and political upheaval. We knew there were things to talk about and to dream about and to hope for. And these 3 talks explored the past, present, and today, the future of theater in moments of change. And we seem to be almost there. The past few weeks have ushered in an incredible renaissance here in New York. You can feel it in the streets and all the neighborhoods of the city. Rates of infection are down. Live performances are being scheduled, and we are so grateful to say that it looks like we will be able to return to gathering together once again. Of course, this year has also inspired many important and necessary conversations about equity in the arts and in theater, and radical imaginings of what the future of the industry might look like. So I'm very excited and hopeful about this conversation. It's called Future. Where do we go now? And it's an hour of dreaming together about what's in store for theater's next act. And speaking of dream, this panel is a dream panel. It is an honor to welcome such a wonderful group. Sahim Ali, Associate Artistic Director of the Public Theater, and director of Mary Wise, which we will see in the Delacorte this summer. The celebrated Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Susan Laurie Parks, Master Writer Chair at the Public Theater. The incredible director May Ann Teo, Artistic Director of the Musical Theater Factory, which has brought us so many incredible works, including A Strange Loop. It was originally developed there. And the incredible Stevie Walker-Webb, Obie Award-winning director and playwright who directed Ain't No More at the Public in 2019. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you all, as the public is listening to all this news this week. A few weeks ago, we heard about the Delacorte opening, and there was a resounding cheer across the city. And this week, we heard so much news about theater and reopening plans. And I wanted to ask you each, as artists, how do you feel on hearing this news? What's your reaction to it?
It's not for me, it's not the it's the what. Theaters reopening, yay. What are we going to be looking at? What are we going to be doing? And I think that's a question that a lot of folks, a lot of theater artists and a lot of audience members I know are asking, because also, where are we going to be sitting? What's the seating configuration going to be? Those are COVID specific questions. What are the safety going to be? Those are COVID specific questions, but also what's the content going to be? What's the conversation going to be? How are we going to move? How are we going to embrace, I think, the cultural reckoning that the world has been having, most specifically this year and last year? And how are we going to somehow embrace that and see it represented not only on our stages, but in our audiences as well. So those are questions. I mean, so I have, when I hear the news, it's like, yay, and now what,
Mayanne, you sort of not, when Susan Laurie started speaking, you had a immediate reaction.
Yes, I have so much resonance with that.
Mm.
What are we addicted to?
Oh.
What are we addicted to? Are we addicted to nostalgia still?
Yeah.
Have we, in this time of isolation, actually examined the patterns of our own human behavior and what we are longing for and what we are medicating ourselves with or healing ourselves with, right? What is medication and what is healing? Because sometimes they're not the same thing. And I'm really interested in where theater is going to be in terms of that. Like, what is it? Are we just going to once again be seeing the same thing? Because we're afraid of how many tickets it will sell now and how much more expensive it will be because of the da-da-da-da. What are the questions that are really going to still be at the core, and how are we actually answering them, and who gets to answer them? Who gets to answer those questions? And from what frameworks are they answering those questions from? Is it from a framework of transformative justice, or is it from a framework of punitive justice? How are we holding each other together and lifting each other up and holding each other accountable? That is all at the core for me when we say we're coming back, right?
And as those questions, you're asking those questions as artists, how do you sort of proceed with sort of beginning to make art for this sort of, eventual reemergence? What's sort of how is it incorporated into sort of the practice of what you are all doing?
Yeah, I would say for me, it's, the paradox of it is that it's equal parts excitement and trepidation, because we're thrilled to be back with people and doing the art, but it's like anxiety inducing a little bit, because have we changed enough? How much is too much? And the paradox in like returning and like going back, we all agree we don't want to go back to some things, right? We want some things to change. Some things have to change. Well, what are those things? How can we actually like integrate new practices into our work in ways that fit into the model of, the economics of what it means to do theater and be engaged in the theater. So I sat in a theater about 2 weeks ago, listening to Andre Holland on stage, recite, do a reading with like 40 people in the audience. And, when the lights went down, it was thrilling. It was like such a thrill to be back in a space with the lights going down and an actor coming out on stage. But that's just, a microcosm. There's like one actor with like 40 people, and we're talking about replicating it, and being back with like so many people. So yeah, like I said, I feel those two things are just at war with each other inside me as I think about, going back to the theater again.
Stevie, how are you feeling with all this news happening?
I feel oddly like I need to continue to be still.
Okay.
I feel like during the COVID years, I never stopped moving in a way. I think many of us art makers, story makers, became kind of neurotic in our need to like we moved from being artists to becoming content creators. And I really hate that term, content creator, that we're just like kind of making content as quickly as we can to kind of like feed an audience that needs to be fed, because, there's been a void there without the theater. So it's like we kind of developed this content creation muscle out of necessity. It was a good thing for the space of time that we had to have it. And so I think that I'm feeling a little bit of like, I think it's a productive kind of fall. It's that trepidation and excitement that Saheem was talking about. I just kind of pause. I feel like I have to pause and figure out what Susan was saying. What is next? Like we got the theater opening up, but what is next? And for me, it's the pause is making me do a lot of self-evaluation. Last year, I never held a camera, and I shot my first film. while the We See White American Theater movement was really coming to foreground and issuing forth, the demands and the criticisms that need to come forth. I quarantined. I took 20 of my artist friends and we went to Vermont and we began to interrogate that question of, is it possible for Black artists to tell stories that don't center around our trauma and our pain? Really to dig into that question, kind of prompted by Playing in the Dark, Whiteness in the Literary Imagination by Toni Morrison, that seminal book where she puts forth this idea that it's a serious question for artists of color to write and tell stories beyond the white gaze. And I think it's something that we talk about a lot. But then I was like, wait a minute, Toni Morrison said it's serious. I don't know if I've actually ever taken that really serious. I was like, I can do that. That's easy. And it's like, no, it's a serious question. And so we went away for a month in the middle of the quarantine to try to do that. And it's really funny how hard it was for me and my friends, my learned, well-trained friends, to just sit around and tell a story that wasn't centered around racialized trauma. And so I think I say all that to say that I think in this, what I'm excited about in this next moment is stories that I understand that we have to continue to dismantle so many things. Everything needs to be dismantled. That's just the bottom line. But it's like, I wonder if my generation could also spend some space and some time thinking about imagining what's possible. Mm-hmm. Like actually we're dismantling, we have the dismantlers. There's a troop of people who are dismantlers. We need those people, keep dismantling. But we also need a troop of people who are imagining these bold futures that after we've dismantled everything, what's next? And I don't know if we've done that rigorous work to really start to imagine what stories are like beyond our trauma. Even if it's not possible, I think that it's our job to do the work of imagining it and trying to create it, because that's the only way we're going to get there.
Right. And are there sort of
Sorry, I have Stellene.
Yeah. Please, I want you guys to interrupt me. It makes a much better conversation.
I love that so much. I think about the Vedic sutras of good theater, right? And the Vedic sutras of good theater are, number one, entertain the drunk, which to me is like engage everyone and celebrate all the time. The second one is reveal the way the world works, which I think like drama really does that well. Like we're like Western drama, it goes deep. It's like, this is why trauma happens. This is this is why you didn't make that decision. And this is why you left at the end of the show, blah, blah. Very good at revealing the way the world works. And we can always do better at that in terms of our revelations of why the world works in a particular way. But the third one that I really connect Stevie, with what you just said is show us how to live. I just love that. Show us how to live. What does that mean for artists to be engaged in that question, to show us how to live? Which is not a Pollyanna, like, we are all happy and, whatever all the time. But what is it really to show us how to live? I want to sit in that so much more than I think we're allowed to.
I think one of the ways to live is, which I love that comment, show us how to live. I think one of the ways to live that I found in the past year and a half is to I've had to evaluate myself and my practices on the fly. I wasn't, Stevie, you were making a film. I was show running Genius Aretha, and we were going through last summer into the fall, and we aired in March. This past March, but I didn't have a chance to sit and evaluate. I had to evaluate while moving and while working with a crew of 300 or more people, and it's very important to be able to also in the stillness is very important. And everybody who doesn't have a meditation practice yet, begin today or yesterday. Stillness is very important. And also if you have to evaluate yourself on the fly, that's very important too. I hope that something I was writing last year, Place for the Plague Year, it showed me how to live. Let's put it that way. And I hope that it can show others how to live. It's not centered around Black trauma. It's centered around, what we were going through, what I was going through last year. And I hope that can be an offering toward that beautiful suggestion that Stevie and Mayanne posited. So.
And I think that's a beautiful way to think about it, Susan Laurie, like offerings, like what offerings can we give, right? If we want to put out a certain amount of, if we recognize the energy that we've been around prior to this, like what do we want to put out after this? Like, because we're engaged in that, like as makers, as people involved in the creative dialogue, if it's been so much Black trauma, how can we bring Black joy and double down on it after this? And I've been thinking so much about that, because I always try and think about the thing that we're engaging with on our time on this planet to do. And I feel like the thought process, especially during quarantine, has been just about like even doubling and tripling down on positivity and how we can do that, because we can do that. Like I don't think that engaging in positive energy necessarily means something that's trite or unworthy of like serious dialogue. Like you can do those things, and maybe there hasn't been enough of that. And I just think that so I'm moved by when you talk about offering, Susan Laurie, because I definitely want to be in that space.
Yeah, I feel you on this whole positive thing and how to think about hope, right? Like we can throw that 4-letter word around a lot. I love what Rebecca Solnit says about hope, where it's not like hope is not clutching the lottery ticket, sitting on the couch while the house is burning around you. It's the axe that breaks down the door. That's hope. How do we invest in that, right? It's like not just like an ostrich, a head in the sand. That's not positivity, actually. It's forward and action and motion.
Ooh, yes. Can you just, where was that from? That last?
Rebecca Solnit.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Yes.
Also, I'm just going to offer a frame for trauma, and again, not to throw out the comments that have come before about it. And I totally agree with Toni Morrison and you too, Stevie, about let's find other ways to tell our stories. But mythologically speaking, the trauma, the descent into hell, right, is what the hero or shero did to obtain the boon. Demeter thinks of Hades because Persephone's there. What's his name? The dude with the lyre goes down to rescue Eurydice, right? I'm spacing on his name, but Orpheus, exact. Thanks. So we do these descents into the underworld, if you will, into the traumatic space to obtain the boon for society. So maybe and this is where trauma porn comes in. Trauma porn does not obtain the boon for society, but real exploration of, like Toni Morrison's Beloved, she's going into that trauma space to obtain the boon that she will share with the community. And so we need to remember that descending into trauma has a very specific mythological purpose. Christ in the tomb, comes out and displays himself. So blah, blah, blah. You've heard it all, but just, I've been thinking about that too. Like, what use is it? And can it be for something? Yeah.
No, and when you said that, when the boon to society, you also did that with your hand, right? Back to the idea of the offering again. It really, but it is. That's, what a wonderful way to think about all this. My question is maybe a bit more practical in that you are all thinking about these vital questions, and yet you are also being asked at the same time to make and create. And I wondered if you could explain to how you manage to do both those things. The idea of evaluate while moving, or Stevie, you talked about sort of the need to be still, but I imagine there's many demands on you to sort of not be still and to produce. So how are you all as artists, as theaters reemerging, as people are asking you for for work and productions, how do you manage to continue to engage in these vital questions and while moving and creating and producing? I mean, because or maybe the answer is there's not a space right now to allow artists to do that. I don't know.
There's a space, and there's a strong desire. In my experience, I just know that I'm not going to do everything completely perfectly right. I'm not going to make always the best, wisest, most righteous decisions. I'm going to stumble. I'm going to write a stupid scene. I'm going to, say something that's not great. And I'm going to constantly, self-monitor. Again, I got this meditation practice. It's very helpful. So I can have moments of stillness in the day when I find them. But I just know that I'm not going to get it all right. And I hope that the community is going to be encouraging of what we have to offer, even though it's might not all be perfect yet.
Susan Laurie, I'm going to hit you up for that meditation practice because I am in dire need
on this college
of one.
I mean, easy, brother. I'm okay. I'm gonna DM you after. I'm just
please, because that's you talk about the paradoxes, right? Because we are in the theater, we're already operating from a scarcity model, right? There are not enough jobs. There are way fewer jobs than there are of us who are trying to fill them, and that has quadrupled actually, and in the new environment we're about to enter. And so, how do we give ourselves a sustainable lifestyle while engaging in the work when we actually, that hamster wheel that we know so well? How do you have a healthy? What are you doing to substitute for the income that you need to live on if you're going to have more stillness and say no to work? So it just continues to be elusive with the models that we have right now. So, the questions of equity that we're having, the question of institutional support, is like, how can we pay artists more? How can we provide more for folks to be able to live off of? Otherwise, they're going to go off to other industries that are more lucrative, or they're going to just, not be artists anymore. And I don't have the answer to that. I'm really fortunate right now to have had this shift, to have gone from freelance to now working at the public, an institution that is asking these questions, very, very like deep interrogation right now about just like, what does equity look like on the other side of this? But I mean, talk about, again, it's like, I don't know how to resolve from because I find, especially this month, that it's going up, the anxiety is going up, and it's like the tension is going up because we feel the emergence, the resurgence, and how to meet that and maintain some sense of health and balance. It continues to be a struggle. So definitely, that's why I said, Susan Laurie, I'm going to need some help, my friend. I'll call on you.
And we sort of pushed forward into the future, but I think a lot of what is coming up in this discussion is what you all have as artists and as creators sort of been doing and thinking about over this last, it's more than a year, I guess. I keep saying this year, but it's more than a year. And how has your idea of what you do in the theater, has it shifted and evolved, or Sahim, you seem to react. Did you feel like what you sort of want your theater to do, has it changed this time, I should say?
I'll let Stevie go because I think he was going to jump in and say something, and then I'll come in.
I appreciate that. My perspective has kind of done a complete revolution back to, so I entered the theater as a social worker and an activist first. My first degree is in social work. So I'm really an imposter on this call a little bit. And so I like to kind of take from theater the therapeutics of theater and give that to, if it's the play that I'm working on, the playwright that I'm working with, and just let it spiral out and out. And so for me, last year, my brother became the subject of study for me. He became my teacher, and learning about like the just how grossly inadequate the mental health care system is in this country, and how pandemic the problem is. And so I've seen, like, so that opened up a whole gateway of what this thing that I'm calling creative advocacy, which is kind of connected to how my theater practice is being influenced. When I talk about this stillness, borrowing from what you were saying, Susan Laurie, about kind of evaluating yourself in motion, right? Being the kind of person that can do that. The stillness is a part of that for me. It's being able to practice sensuality in my day, to practice sensuality in how I, like, if I'm working on a play, if I'm advocating for my brother, which is grueling work, and in advocating for him, I met hundreds of other families who needed to be advocated for similar and sometimes worse situations, and feeling like, oh my God, I need to do it all. Whether that's I need to finish this film that is going to blow open the situation of mental illness, or I need to finish this film that's going to blow open, like this, the strata of equity in the American theater. I need to do this. But in doing that, realizing that I'm not being sensual in my work, I'm not being sensual in my daily practice, in my relationships myself. So my stillness is kind of an activated stillness of moving with intention, and not knowing when I don't know, and stopping when I just need to stop. I was trying to go somewhere with this, but what you were saying, Saheem, about kind of the deficit models. I wanted to talk a little bit about the deficit models of the theater. I left the church. I grew up in the Black church. Those are the first plays I was a part of, whatever. I left the church because I found that the church as a belief system, the church that I grew up in, after a while, I felt constrained by the beliefs of that church. I spent some time trying to make that church do what I wanted it to do. And I realized that, no, there were people in this church who were getting what they needed from that church. That church was just not for me. And I could not configure that entire church in the way that the people in that church were getting the light that they needed from those speakers in that culture to configure just me. And so it's like, so I left the church and I ran into the theater, and that's, and I call the theater the church in the wild. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, right now, there are all these beacons of light. People are saying, the church is not giving me what I need. The church is not giving me what I need. And I'm in a moment where I'm like, wait a minute, maybe we need outliers. We'll always need outliers. We'll always need people who are innovating on the vanguard, on the edge of the next idea, nailing their thesis to the doors of the churches. And at the same time, so reform has to happen inside and outside. So for me, I'm saying all that to say that for me, I'm in a space of really trying to imagine how I might exist outside of institutions, exist outside of paradigms that are already there. Because I feel like it's love work. It's my duty to be an outlier right now. It's my duty to extrapolate the therapeutics of theater and to run into the wilderness of the mental health care system, or to run into the wilderness of advocacy land and take theater into those spaces in new and bold ways. That's not to say that I don't want to direct plays to the public, but it's not, it's not to say that I don't want to produce plays on Broadway. But I think that there's I feel a lot of bitterness in cynicism in some of my colleagues in this moment. And I love this idea of offering. I feel like right now, the antidote to my bitterness and my cynicism is saying, what can I offer? And it's like, for me, it might mean me being an outlier and inventing some path that I haven't seen yet. Susan Laurie, you did that. Saheem, you've done that. Man, you've done that. And so it's like, and I'm trying to do that in my own way. I think if we all are doing that, then we'll reform the theater when we reform ourselves. I'm sorry, I just rambled.
I just want to say your path, I think the paths we haven't seen yet are, the path you haven't seen yet, Stevie, is your path. That's the path. By overcoming that bitterness that you talk about, and I felt many feel bitterness, anger this past year. I've only wanted to listen to Black voices, and realizing that a lot of my colleagues, comrades, mentors, friends in the arts are not POCs. So if we're going to get through this together, there has to be a we in there, and I got to sort that out, just within myself and within my work. But the path that I haven't seen yet is the path that I'm walking. And while I, have great mentors and follow in the footsteps and stand on the shoulders of giants, the path that I'm creating is a path I'm walking, and to overcome my bitterness, anger, and all those feelings, I do my thing, which is, like I said, I wrote a play a day for a whole year and 13 months, that my thing. I got into that thing again that I do. I wrote stuff, and, I go, what is it? Was that I go, I know by going where I need to go, that feeling also. But we must keep doing our work, because that is the path. Those are the song lines. Those are the paths that the world needs to maybe, reconnect itself or better connect itself.
I just want to say a name that, like, that path making is so evident for everyone else to then understand how to make their own path, right? Like that every new path, like you're making, Stevie, and that you have made, Susan Laurie, has made the path for so many others. I think about how Hannah Sharif talks about being the artistic director of St. Louis Rep, right? And how she's like, I'm here to make sure that the path is open for others. And that, like, it's very much both of sort of our ability to have artistic integrity to our vision and be in community together, and always make sure that we're being there in support of another. I mean, I'll say this. I'll say that Susan Laurie teaches a class of Oscar at NYU, and I was brought in as one of the guest directors, right? And this was several years ago. And there's this moment at the end where, I was in that class with like Lee Sunday Evans and Danya Taymor, like superstars, like superstars. I was like, oh my God, I'm like the runt of the litter here. You know what I mean? I was like, whoa. And I remember at the last class, Susan Laurie, you put your forehead to mine and you said, don't stop directing. And I can't tell you how I have held on to that when I'm like, oh, I'm shit. I don't know what I'm doing, which is all the time. And I can hear your voice. You're like a living ancestor for me, saying in my head, don't stop directing. And that's beyond directing. Don't stop hoping, wishing, dreaming, living, making change. Don't stop. It's okay. Like, rest, but don't stop. And I think, like, everything that we do will be witnessed by another, even if it's in the silence of our own seat in meditation. It's a powerful thing to be able to be still. So when we didn't answer immediately, I was cool with that.
Yeah.
We're thinking and we're sitting with what is the most important thing to say in this moment, because there's a care that's being taken. And I think we move at the speed of trust. Let's just move at the speed of trust. Let's just move in a way that is not about capitalism and industry.
Move at the speed of trust. I wanted to ask you all, the word community has come up a lot. And of course, you have your community. The audience is part of that when there is a show happening. And in so many of the questions that have been brought up today, where do you see the audience helping these questions, or what do you hope the audience's role will become as we return? Because I know so many people watching today, they're artists certainly watching, but a lot of people are dedicated theater audience members, and I'd love to bring them into the conversation with people who they love your work and idolize you. So I know they're thinking, what can I do as an audience member?
I mean, the audience is the other hand clapping, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
We need y'all. They're the thing that I keep, maybe not in mind in a negative way, but I keep in my heart when I write. When I wrote Plays for the Plague Year, I was thinking of us, and us includes the audience. You know, I do my thing by writing things, you know, the audience does their thing by showing up. I mean, I also show up to write something, but you do your part. Literally, I mean, do your part. Your part, my part is to write. Your part is to show up. All the world's a stage. I know. Now when you know what we're talking about, you know what I'm saying? To quote a DWM, but you know, I mean, it's true.
Yeah, and if anything has happened these past 14 months, it's been that this pandemic has been the enemy of community, right? Like it's everything about it is to separate us, to isolate us, to prevent us from gathering, whether we're gathering as artists or gathering with audiences. And so, you know, we've definitely come to value that in a way that we've taken for granted all of our lives prior to this, right? And we've kind of pushed through and found ways of creating community virtually, like right now, what we're doing, find spaces where we can be safe with other people, like what Stevie did with his colleagues, and we're all like on Instagram following along your lovely like journey that you were going on. But I think that what, you know, what an audience can do on the other side of this is to continue like to support institutions that are like trying to do the hard work. You know, it's going to be very hard work. We like, even when we're able to reopen, will they come? We don't know. You know, it's no one knows, no one can predict. So I would say the audiences can just support institutions that are trying to take risks with artists, that are trying to like respond to the moment by engaging in some deep questions and engaging with artists who haven't had an opportunity before. There is usually one, you know, the ones that want to take risks are afraid of taking risks because they're worried if the audience is going to come, right? And so just like asking an audience to bring some faith and trust and generosity, you know, all these things, we need to ask them to double down on them, because we're going to need them if institutions are really going to do things differently than how they're doing them before. And so I think, you know, they're our partners. We're doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for them. They are our community as much as we are our own community. So I say, you know, for the audiences out there, just to think about all of those things in ways in which they can show up for us as we would like to show up for them.
Mm-hmm. I would throw down a challenge to that, Saheem. Prove to us how important community is by showing up, because I have, again, working in TV and film, you know, TV and film. Okay, the community are the folks who shoot it, you know, shoot the show. And then you can be all alone in your home watching. You don't have to like engage in the community, but theater asks double that. We have to come together to make it, and we have to come together to show it, to display it, to offer it to you. So prove to us that community is something worth fighting for. It's going to be a joyous fight. It's going to be a coming together that's going to be like a lover coming home, and we don't know what to expect, and we see each other again, or maybe you see the profile of someone sitting, maybe not directly next to you, maybe a seat over, for the first time, and you're realizing there is a stranger, my sister, perhaps. My brother, who I've never seen before, perhaps. Look, these are my people. Prove to us that that's for real, because it is, because it's true.
I'm over here saying amen, so I have my mic muted because I'm just amen, yes. But I've always thought about the audience as borrowing from Bilal as the spectator, the spect actor. That they're not just there, that they're not passive. They're the thing that makes the play. And so I love that challenge, Susan, that prove to us that, you know, and I'm also thinking about in terms of these deficit models, right? Like, I was for whatever reason, I've been looking at the history of Shakespeare again, not the plays. I've always been more obsessed with the history around the plays, and the plays themselves. The plays are great, but the history around them are really fascinating to me. And just like looking at the fact that Shakespeare had the king and the queen's ear. He had the king and the queen's ear. You know, 3 times a year he performed for the queen. up 9 times a year, he performed for King James. And so it's just like, what does that say about audience making? And I'm thinking a lot about the fact that we who are in the theater, Black, white, brown, of all shades, of all hues, of all cultural backgrounds, we are the last hope. Maybe this is arrogant. I think we are the last hope for kind of human evolution in society. When I'm sitting in the theater, and no matter how evolved someone is on their kind of spiritual journey, they're there because they're hungry to be stretched. They're there to learn something new, to be exposed to something new. They paid a ticket and they've caught the train and they've done all of that to sit in the theater with someone and be challenged. Whether or not they like how they're challenged, but they're there for those reasons. I say all that to say that I'm really imagining, how do we get the king and the queen's ear? We spend so much time like, this theater warring for this grant and that theater warring for that grant, and this playwright wanting to get that prize. And we're kind of like, we're infighting a lot in ways. And really, while we're not a monolith, but we are a tribe of artists in a way. There's diversity in the tribe, but we are a tribe. And if we could ever kind of like look to the left and right and see ourselves as tribes, men and women, we could then say, oh shit, we have to get together and somehow grab the ear of the queen and the king. We should be, what we write we should be collecting the ear of the most powerful people in the nation 3 times a year, 9 times a year. And maybe we have to all team up to create that. And that's how we'll grow the audiences. And those deficits, we have to start imagining beyond our deficit thinking. And that's what I mean when I say like if there's some way for us to become that powerful, to become that loud, we can be. But we have to stop looking at each other as competition and start seeing each other as sisters and brothers and others. And it doesn't matter what church you attend. It doesn't matter as long as you're marching in the same direction as me, I don't care if you're skipping. And if I'm rolling, let's go. And let's lock arms and let's go beat on the doors of power together. That's how you build audiences. And I'm really interested in seeing how, because we've been decimated as an industry together. So it's like, this is a real opportunity for us to come back as an industry together in a way that we've never stood together before.
I like 1000% cheering that on. And I just want to name March on Broadway and all the things that are happening to really speak out against the massive amounts of harm that Scott Rudin has caused, right? In terms of all of that and how people are really gathering together to say, like, we don't want this for us anymore. And it's not about self-interest, right? It's not about self-interest, and holding on to a lead role in a Broadway show is really hard to turn away from. But thank you, Karen Olivo, for doing that and being able to speak out. So all of these people who are speaking out so that more of us can gather together in how scary it might be to be able to speak truth to power, that is going to continually need to happen. And how we hold people accountable to like the power that they hold because of the resources that they have. And what is their responsibility to the rest of the community? That's what we need. That's what we need to be all in communication with. I 1000% agree. I want to talk about the audience also in line with that. One of the most beautiful pieces I ever saw was called 9 Hills, 1 Valley, and it was from a company in India. And the show ended, and all of the performers bowed down to the audience with their heads on the floor. And I remember sitting that, and I remember as an audience member feeling the immense connection of my attention to the powerful work they had been doing for years. I was connected to all the work they had been doing for years in that moment because of that action. And I think about what it means to pay attention. What are we asking an audience to do is extraordinary, because our attention spans are extremely short. So for us to be in communication with attention being paid, it's such a beautiful thing that is really beyond the ticket that you're paying for. I think about how I want and long for an audience to come in and not think about consumption, but communion. What does it mean if they're coming in longing to understand instead of judge? What does it mean if they're coming in with open hearts and open minds to try to understand something outside of themselves and not just want to be seen? I long for ways in which us artists can step up to that and always be seeking that, what is beyond ourselves and what we need to be made seen. And to have, like, that's what community is to me, is actual long-term sustained engagement with the deepest parts of ourselves.
Yeah, I know. I wish there could just be stillness and silence for like a sustained amount of time right now, because so much of what has been said is what we all need to hear and feel, but it's also a reminder of all that we missed during this time. This kind of love and caring and art from all of you. And Sahim, you said we'll put on the shows. Will you be there? We will be there. We will all be there. And I thank you all for doing this. I can't tell you how moving this conversation was, and I'm deeply grateful for all that you all do always, and for what you all did for all of us during this hour. So thank you, and again, we will be there. We will see you for sure at the Delacorte, and I will make sure to see you all, no matter where you are making art. So thank you, and man, my head is on the floor. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. This was beautiful. Really beautiful.